So, you think waking up in ancient Greece would be cool. You imagine marble temples glowing under the sun, men in white tunics discussing philosophy while sipping wine, olive trees swaying in the warm breeze, and the distant sound of a lyre being plucked near a marble fountain. Sounds romantic. Except the moment you open your eyes in Athens, round for 30 BCE, reality punches you in the face. First of all, the smell. It's not sweet herbs or sea breeze. It's a thick, choking blend of fish guts, urban sewage, animal sweat, and roasted garlic that's been sitting out for way too long. You're lying on a stone street, dusty and hot, probably sticky, and very confused. The sun is beating down hard, and your clothes, whatever you arrived in, mark you immediately as strange. You try to get up. Your foot lands in something squishy. You don't know what it is, but you immediately regret wearing modern shoes with soft soles. A man walks by, staring. He mutters something in a dialect you don't understand. It's quick but ancient Greek, and you're mute. You don't speak it. You don't read it. You can't even fake it. You're now officially a barbaros, a barbarian. That's what the Greeks called anyone who didn't speak their language. And no, they don't mean it nicely. You try to gesture for help, but your hands flail in a way that looks suspicious. A woman hurries past you with her head covered, not even looking at your face. Behind her, a man stops and glares. You have no idea what you did, but he's already angry. Maybe you stood too close. Maybe you made eye contact. Maybe he just doesn't like the way you look. Suddenly, he shouts something and throws a fig at your chest. It's rotten. It bursts on impact. Congratulations, you've just insulted someone's honor without even opening your mouth. You back away and try to disappear into the crowd. But the crowd is a mess of half-naked children, toothless old men, and vendors yelling about dried fish, sour wine, and bread that looks more like a brick than food. You try to approach your stall. Maybe to barter or explain your situation. The vendor sees you, narrows his eyes, and pulls his basket closer. You don't belong. And everyone knows it. There are no inns, no welcome centers, no police officers to help the lost. There are only citizens, non-citizens, slaves, and now you something in between. Which might be worse. A group of boys runs past, kicking a ball made from stitched leather. One of them sees you and points. Barbaros, he shouts. And the rest start laughing. You smile awkwardly. They threw pebbles. You flinch and walk faster. You're starving. You'd kill for a sandwich. But food here is not for strangers. Unless you have drachmae or a known reputation, you're out of luck. The bread costs more than you can offer, which is nothing. And even if you tried to steal a loaf, you wouldn't get far. Theft is punished quickly and publicly. If you're lucky, you get whipped. If not, you're enslaved. That's not an exaggeration. Enslavement of outsiders is legal. If you look weak, confused, or alone, someone might decide you're unclaimed property. All it takes is a rope and a strong arm. You duck into a narrow alley to hide. It's darker. Quieter, and it smells even worse. Someone nearby is relieving themselves against a wall. You gag. You back out and end up near the Agora, the marketplace. This is the heart of Athens, the center of trade, gossip, and politics. You expect some kind of order, but it's chaos. Chickens, clay pots, fish, fruit, leather, wine, olives. Angry philosophers yelling about virtue. And 3 different groups arguing over whether Sparta will attack. You try to listen in. Maybe blend into the crowd. One man, wearing a threadbare tunic and missing to teeth, notices you. He asks you a question, something about parakuls, or taxes, or military service. You say nothing. He frowns. Another man joins in. Now they're circling, asking more questions. Why are you here? Who are you? Why don't you answer? Are you a runaway slave? Are you a spy from Thebes? Are you sick? Do you have the plague? You panic. You mumble something. Wrong move. Now, they think you're speaking in tongues. A woman behind them makes the sign against evil spirits. This is spiraling fast. You back away and run again. This time, toward the temple. It's tall, beautiful, and maybe, just maybe, a place of refuge. You approach the steps, only to be blocked by a priest. He takes one look at your strange clothes and sweaty, panicked face and says something sharp. It's not welcoming. He waves you off. You're not allowed here. Not without a sacrifice. Not without purpose. And definitely not if you might bring miasma spiritual pollution. Because if the gods get offended by your presence, everyone suffers. Earthquakes, droughts, failed harvests, they blame it all on impiety. You sit on a rock near the base of the hill, trying to breathe. This isn't the ancient Greece from the documentaries. It's loud, hot, smelly, aggressive, and full of invisible rules. You don't know the customs. You don't know the language. You don't even know how to find water. There's no plumbing, no fountains for strangers, no shade that isn't already claimed. You're sunburned, dehydrated, starving, and increasingly aware that no one is coming to help you. Time travel, it turns out, is not a vacation. It's a death sentence in slow motion. A child nearby shouts again. This time, more children gather. One throws a clump of dirt. It hits your leg. You stand. They scatter. You wander toward a hill where men are gathering with scrolls and laurel wreaths. The assembly. Democracy in action. Except you're not invited. Only male citizens with both parents born in Athens can speak. You don't even qualify as a person here. You turn and walk back into the alleys, just as the sun begins to set. You don't know where you'll sleep. You don't know if you'll survive the night. All you know is that you would until last a day, in ancient Greece, and the day isn't even over. You survived your first few hours in Athens by dodging rotten figs and social expectations. But now, something more primitive kicks in. You smell. Not a little. Not in I forgot deodorant way. No. You stink like fear, sweat, and foreign confusion. But that's not the weird part. The weird part is no one else seems to notice. Because in ancient Greece, you're not the only one who smells. In fact, smelling is just normal. You decide you need a bath, a real bath. Maybe one of those beautiful stone ones you've seen in documentaries, marble basins, flowing water, pretty attendants pouring oil over your shoulders, maybe even a sponge and a relaxing herbal. Scent? Nope. Here's how cleanliness works in for 30 BCE. Most people don't actually bathe with water. They slather themselves in olive oil. Real, greasy, sticky olive oil. Then they take a curved metal scraper called a strigil and scrape the oil, dirt, sweat, and whatever else off their body. That's it. That's the routine. No soap. No loofah. No shampoo. Just a layer of oil scraped off like yesterday's lasagna from a baking tray. And if you're poor, you don't even have oil. You're lucky if you can dunk yourself in a cold stream once a month. The average person smells like sun-baked goat with notes of fermented barley. You want to clean your face. You want to wash your hands. But there's no running water. There are wells and cisterns. Sure, but they're public and precious. People wait in line for them. They don't waste water on hygiene. Water is for drinking and maybe cooking. If you waste it washing your armpits, you're asking for a slap. Maybe you spot a public bathhouse and think, finally, salvation. But hold on. Those are for men, specifically. Men with some money and free time. And even then, they're not what you expect. These are noisy, crowded, slippery places where people talk politics while naked. You don't just walk in and rinse off. You lie on a stone slab while another man rubs oil on your back. Then you sweat in a steam room. Then you scrape it all off. It's part massage, part social club, part semi-public nudity, and you're not welcome. You don't have status. You don't have coins. You don't have a clue what you're doing. You wander off, sticky, dusty, and beginning to accept that you may never feel clean again. Then nature calls, and here's where the real horror begins. There are no toilets in most homes. There are chamber pots, ceramic bowls stored in the corner, used in the middle of the night or whenever you need to go. Afterward, you empty it, where, into the street, literally, through the window, out the door, splash. If you're lucky, there's a designated dumping spot in the alley. If not, it's wherever gravity allows. Public toilets exist, but they're primitive and rare. They're stone benches with holes lined up side by side. No dividers, no privacy, no doors, no dignity. You sit next to a stranger and try not to make eye contact. You look round for a toilet paper. There is none. Options include a sponge on a stick shared and rinsed between uses, a handful of moss if you're outdoors, or small smooth stones. Yes, stones. You now understand why Greek statues always look so tense. You do your business and walk away. You try not to look back. The smell follows you anyway. Now you're thinking about brushing your teeth. Surely the Greeks cared about their dazzling smells. After all, they sculpted perfect mouths in marble. But no, dental hygiene is speculative at best. Some might chew on twigs, others rinse with vinegar, maybe rub their teeth with ashes or baking soda if they're fancy. But for the most part, people lose their teeth early. Toothaches are treated with prayers or pliers. You rub your jaw, suddenly hyper-aware of your molars. You realize you haven't had water since you arrived. Drinking water is another gamble. Wells might be clean or not. Some sources are contaminated. Some taste like iron, or sulfur, or worse. That's why people drink wine. Not fancy wine. Not smooth, aged red with a hint of oak. No, this is rough. Sour wine diluted with water. If you drink it straight, people think you're uncivilized. They'll literally call you a barbarian. Again, you sit by a public fountain, hoping for a sip. A woman nearby fills a jug and glares at you. This isn't for strangers. This is for families. You back away. You try to take comfort in the fact that even wealthy Greeks aren't that much cleaner. They might have slaves to help them wash, better oil, better tools, but even they smell like armpit under sunlight. Hygiene, as a concept, is communal, functional. You clean yourself just enough to not offend someone. But no one's trying to smell like roses. You miss soap. You miss deodorant. You miss toothpaste and indoor plumbing and toilet paper and warm showers and hot towels and minty freshness. You miss everything. You wonder how anyone ever felt romantic or philosophical in a place that smells like this. But then you realize everyone here is nose-blind. This is just life. The stink is part of the background. You're the only one suffering. You sit on a stone bench, covered in olive oil and dirt, breathing through your mouth, and slowly accepting your fate. Welcome to ancient Greek hygiene. You wouldn't last a day. So now that you've accepted you'll never be clean again, your stomach decides it's time to ruin your day even further. Hunger creeps in, not polite hunger, but the kind that makes you dizzy and desperate. You haven't eaten since you woke up in this beautiful, awful time machine accident called ancient Greece, and your body is starting to panic. So naturally, you go looking for a food. And that's when you realize the Greek diet is not what Instagram led you to believe. There's no roasted lamb on a silver platter, no golden grapes being hand-fed by toga-wearing attendants, no platters of honey-drizzled pastries just waiting to be devoured. What you're looking at is bread. Cold, dense, barley bread. It's the foundation of the Greek diet. And by bread, we don't mean fluffy sourdough or warm pita. We mean something closer to a rock. The kind of loaf that could double as a self-defense weapon. You try to bite it. You regret everything. If your teeth survive the first crunch, you're rewarded with a mouthful of grainy dry mush that tastes like someone baked despair into a brick. Barley was cheap, filling, and available, which is code for it was almost people could afford. Wheat was for the rich. You're not rich. You're not even legal. You are barley tier, and it's going to be your entire personality. Maybe you think you'll find a nice salad. You know, tomatoes, cucumbers, a little faded. No. Tomatoes haven't made it to Europe yet. Cucumbers are rare. Lettuce exists, but it's bitter and often boiled. As for feta, sure, if you can find it. Goat cheese is a delicacy, and if you're not a citizen or wealthy merchant, you won't be seeing much of it. And that's assuming you're not lactose intolerant, because lactose intolerance doesn't matter here. If cheese makes you sick, you just deal with it or die. Either way, cheese wins. You're thirsty. You want something cold and sweet and refreshing. Instead, you get wine. But not good wine. Ancient Greek wine is sour, thick, gritty, and unfiltered. It is often stored in clay jars and has the subtle aroma of foot sweat and sea salt, and it's always mixed with water. Drinking it straight marks you as either uncivilized or a complete maniac. In fact, it's so taboo that if someone catches you sipping undiluted wine, they might assume you're mentally unwell or spiritually corrupted. So you find a communal cup, try a watered-down version, and attempt not to gag. It tastes like someone fermented sadness, and then poured river water over it, and don't even think about clean water as an alternative. It's risky. Water sources are hit or miss. Wells, springs, and cisterns vary wildly in quality. Some are clean. Others are swimming with bacteria, parasites, or the remains of someone's chamber pot. You gamble every time you take a sip. You're still hungry. You look round the agro for street. Food. There are vendors. Some sell olives salty, oily, and surprisingly bitter. Others offer dried figs, dates, or occasionally salted fish. But they're expensive. You're still broke. No one's giving you anything, because hospitality in Athens is reserved for guests, not random strangers who can speak the language and look like they just got spat out of Mount Olympus trash bin. You try to follow a group of workers to see where they eat. They squat on the ground, break bread with their hands, dip it in oil or vinegar, and chew silently while sweating under the sun. No plates, no cutlery, no talking, just survival. The idea of breakfast, lunch, and dinner as separate events doesn't exist. You eat when you can, which is usually twice a day, maybe. There's no morning bacon and eggs. Breakfast, if anything, is a piece of dry bread dipped in wine. That's it. You won't see scrambled eggs or sweet porridge or any kind of fruit smoothie. Fruit exists, sure, but you have to find it, buy it, and pray it's not infested with worms. Lunch is even sadder. Maybe another piece of barley bread, maybe a few olives, maybe a handful of nuts or beans. Dinner is where things get exciting if you're lucky. If there's a festival, or a sacrifice, or a family gathering, you might get meat. But don't get too excited. The meat is usually burnt offerings to the gods. Whatever's left over goes to the priests. Then maybe the wealthy donors, and then, if there's anything still edible, to the average people, you might get a small charred bone with a fleck of meat. That's your protein for the week. Most people live off legumes, lentils, chickpeas, beans. They're boiled into mush and eaten with oil or onions. Sometimes garlic, if you're feeling fancy. They're nutritious but taste like punishment. There's a reason Greek comedies made fun of people who ate nothing but lentils. Even they were sick of them. You wonder about dessert. Surely the Greeks had something sweet. They did if you had money. Honey was the main sweetener. It was expensive. It was valuable. It was sacred. You weren't just going to drizzle it on your barley brick for fun. If you ever saw honey, it would be in a thin glaze on a pastry during a religious festival, guarded by the host like a dragon hoarding gold. More likely, you'll end your meal with more bread, maybe dipped in wine. Again, you fantasize about pizza, about burgers, about noodles, smoothies, chips, chocolate, grilled chicken, fries. Ice cream, anything except more barley and regret, and even if the food wasn't so terrible. The eating experience itself is grim. You sit on the ground or on a low bench. No chairs, no forks, they haven't been invented yet. You eat with your fingers or maybe a spoon carved from wood or bronze. There are no napkins. You wipe your hands on your clothes or the wall. There's no washing up after. Your clothes get greasy. Your hands stay sticky. Your face itches. And everyone smells like onions and goat. You're surrounded by men belching, scratching, and talking politics like it's foreplay. If you're a woman, you're not even here. Women eat separately, in private, in silence, always behind a wall. Your stomach growls again, and you look at what's in your hand, a piece of barley bread, already starting to go stale. You take a bite, chew for far too long, and try not to cry. Welcome to dinner in ancient Greece. You wouldn't last a day. So, after choking on barley bread and wiping your greasy hands on your already ruined clothes, you decide it's time to embrace the better side of Greek civilization, the higher path, the intellect. After all, this is the birthplace of philosophy. You want wisdom, insight, maybe just a good conversation. You imagine yourself sitting under olive trees with wise old men in flowing robes, sipping diluted wine, and talking about the soul, the universe, and justice. That's what you signed up for, right? Wrong. You make your way to the agora, where men are standing round in circles, talking loudly with their hands, quoting things you don't understand. You approach them carefully. They're older, bearded, intense. You hope you've found philosophers instead. You've found unemployed men with strong opinions and too much time. They're not reading Plato. Plato hasn't even finished writing yet. What they're doing is yelling over each other about whether the gods hate democracy and why their cousin Espham is cursed. You try to nod and blend in, but someone notices your silence. He asks what you think about the nature of the soul. You try to say something smart, maybe quote something vaguely philosophical you remember from high school. Bad idea. Your pronunciation is terrible. Your grammar is non-existent, and you've just accidentally implied that knowledge comes from the intestines. There's a long, awkward pause. Then laughter. One man makes a joke at your expense, something about barbarian brains. Another mimics your accent. Someone offers you a piece of spoiled cheese as a token of wisdom. This is your first taste of Greek debate. Fast, brutal, deeply personal. You back away. Humiliated. Maybe the philosophers are somewhere else like at the academy. But that doesn't exist yet. It won't for another few decades. Socrates is round. But good luck finding him. And if you do, don't expect a gentle welcome. Socratic dialogue isn't polite. It's a relentless barrage of questions designed to expose how little you know. And since you know almost nothing about Athenian law, ethics, cosmology, all the political fallout from the Peloponnesian War, you'll last about 5 minutes before getting publicly demolished. And that's if you're lucky. Because in Athens, philosophy isn't just a hobby, it's dangerous. Say the wrong thing, offend the wrong group, or even just make too much sense to the wrong people, and you're in trouble. Look what happened to Socrates. Spoiler alert, he gets executed. Officially, for corrupting the youth. Realistically, for being annoying and making people feel stupid. Free speech exists here if you're a citizen, male, wealthy, and popular. If not, you get rocks. Literal rocks. People throw them at you when they think your ideas are bad or blasphemous. Maybe you consider trying your luck at a symposium. That's where the elite gather to drink, debate, and philosophize. Right. Kind of. First, you have to be invited. You're not. Second, symposia are wild. They're not peaceful TED Talks. They're drunken parties full of upper-class men reclining on couches, playing drinking games, reciting poetry, making inappropriate jokes, and sometimes vomiting into decorative vases. If you somehow sneak in, you'll immediately be outed as an imposter. You don't know the etiquette. You don't bring your own cabero or lyre player. You don't even know the drinking songs. Someone will make a sarcastic toast to the wisdom of the newcomer, and everyone will laugh as you choke on diluted wine. You think maybe the gymnasium is a better place. It's where people go to exercise their minds and bodies. Maybe you can learn something there. But here's the catch. It's also where men train naked. Yes, fully naked. In public. Curled up. Running. Wrestling. Debating, all while fully exposed to the sun and each other. You're expected to join them, to exercise, to engage in physical culture as part of your intellectual journey. You're not ready. No one is ever ready. You're trying to ponder the meaning of life while someone else's sweaty thighs way too close to your ear. And again, you don't speak the language, you don't understand the jokes, and you're probably offending everyone with your confused glances and awkward posture. Eventually, you retreat to the outskirts of town, hoping to find anyone willing to teach you something. You stumble upon a small group of students listening to a man in a warm cloak talking about virtue. You sit quietly. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is wisdom. Then someone taps your shoulder and asks which school of thought you follow. The Pythagoreans, the Eleatics, the Sophists. You panic. You say something vague about balance and nature. They nod politely, then ignore you completely. You're a novelty, an outsider with no teacher, no background, and no grasp of dialectics. You're a nobody. You're not just dumb by their standards. You're beneath discussion, a curiosity, a cautionary tale. You walk away slowly, defeated, philosophy in ancient Greece isn't peaceful. It's not enlightened. It's a battlefield of egos, a performance, a sport. If you're not trained, not local, not fluent, and not aggressive, you're nothing. And if you do happen to say something meaningful, something smart, something clever, you better hope no one important hears it. Because if the wrong person decides you're dangerous, you might get silenced permanently. Welcome to the cradle of Western thought. You wouldn't last a day. You've tried philosophy, failed at hygiene, and barley bread is now your mortal enemy. So maybe you think it's time to reclaim some dignity. Maybe a little action, something heroic. This is ancient Greece. After all, you've seen the movies Bronze Armor, dramatic speeches, slow-motion sword fights. Maybe you'll join the military, become a warrior, do something that doesn't involve being left in a marketplace. You imagine yourself as a kind of Greek gladiator, except gladiators are Roman. And even then, they were slaves fighting to the death in blood sport arenas. Greece doesn't have that. What Greece has is something far less cinematic and way more likely to get you killed without glory. Welcome to the phalanx, the hoplite formation, the real Greek battlefield. Here's how it works. You and a few hundred other citizens are jammed shoulder to shoulder in a tight, suffocating formation. Everyone carries a massive round shield called an aspis that weighs roughly 15 pounds. Your right arm holds a long spear 7 to 9 feet long, while your left tries not to drop the shield that's half protecting you and half protecting the guy next to you. There's no personal space. There's no flexibility. There's only one command: forward. You don't run. You march. Into enemy spears, into arrows, into chaos. Your helmet is bronze and heavy. It limits your vision and hearing. You can't see much more than the back of the guy in front of you and the dust rising round your legs. Breathing. Good luck. You're sweating. You're choking. Your leather cuirass, if you even have one, is soaked, and you're probably wearing it over a linen tunic that's already chafing in places you don't want to talk about if you're poor. Your armor is minimal. Maybe a helmet, maybe a small breastplate, maybe nothing but a sharp stick and wishful thinking. You are not a Spartan. You're not elite. You're just a guy with a spear and a civic obligation. You don't fight because you're trained. You fight because it's your turn. Every able-bodied male citizen is expected to serve. No exceptions. No deferments. If your name gets pulled, you're marching to the front, even if your last experience with combat was swatting flies in Niagara. Your training consists of don't break formation. That's it. If the line breaks, the phalanx collapses. And when it collapses, people die fast. Because once those shields drop, you are exposed. And the guys on the other side, they're not playing down. They're coming at you with the same desperation and the same sharp weapons. The goal isn't to be a hero. The goal is not to die. And you can still die in the most humiliating ways, tripping on a rock, slipping in blood, taking a spear through the thigh, and then being trampled by your own comrades. There are no medics, no stretchers, no triage. If you fall and you're not immediately dead, that's just too bad. Maybe someone will drag you off the field. Maybe not. Even if you survive, you'll likely end up with broken bones, infected wounds, or chronic injuries that follow you for the rest of your short, miserable life. Congratulations. You now get to limp through the aggro while everyone calls you hero with forced smiles and avoids eye contact, and don't even think about complaining, because this is your duty. This is how you prove you're a real citizen, through blood, bruises, and loyalty to the city. No one wants to hear about your trauma. They want to hear that you stood firm, didn't run, and didn't scream too loud when someone lost a leg. Let's say you win the battle. You'd expect a reward, a parade, maybe a feast. Something to make the horror feel worth it. Nope. You get to go home. That's it. Maybe the city gives a speech. Maybe you get a wreath. But mostly, you return to your farm, missing a toe, sunburned beyond recognition, and knowing full well you'll probably be called back to do it all again next year. And remember, this is only if you're a citizen. If you're a slave, you don't get armor. You don't get information. You get sent in after the battle to clean the corpses, bury the limbs, and scrape the blood from the stones. If you're a mercenary, which many Greeks were, you're fighting for a pay. The only problem is, payment is never guaranteed. Cities go bankrupt, promises get broken. You risk your life, and in return, you might get nothing but a sword wound and a haunting memory. Oh. And if you think this is all noble and clean, picture this. The battlefield is not open fields and dramatic cliffs. It's dusty, cramped, full of noise and panic. It smells like blood, feces, fear and sweat. The ground turns slick with bodily fluids within minutes. You're walking sliding over broken spears, split skulls, and intestines. You can't stop to look. If you do, the guy behind you stabs you in the back by accident. That's called fratricide, and it happens all the time. You finally get dismissed. You think you've earned respect, but back in the city, no one cares. You're just one of thousands. Unless you did something truly spectacular and lived to tell about it, your name won't be remembered. Your wounds won't be honored. Your nightmares are your own. You sit on your porch, watching the sunset with a leg that no longer bends, wondering if the guy you speared had a family. You'll never know. You'll never be the same. And if you hear the city is going to war again next season, you'll have two options: grab your shield or run. And if you run, they'll brand you a coward. And in this culture, that's worse than death. So, you wanted to be a warrior. You thought it'd be glorious. You thought you'd hold a sword and shout something heroic while lightning flashed in the background. But this isn't a movie. It's Greece. And unless you're wearing mythological plot armor, you wouldn't last a day. You've tried being a philosopher, a soldier, and a barely functioning civilian, and none of it worked out. But let's say you show up in ancient Greece and you're not a man, you're a woman. You think maybe things will be different. Maybe you'll spend your time in beautiful robes, attending plays, writing poetry, or lounging in marble courtyards like in the paintings. Maybe you imagine yourself as Sappho, a brilliant poetess, or a priestess in a temple, or one of those wise matriarchs giving sage advice in a peaceful garden. Think again. You wouldn't last a day. First, let's talk about rights. You don't have any. You can't vote. You can't own property in most cities. You can't hold public office. You can't even attend the assembly. Your name is rarely written down. Your opinion is rarely asked. In fact, the ideal woman in many Greek city-states, especially Athens, is one who is never seen or heard in public. Silence and invisibility. That's the gold standard. You live in the back of the house. In the gynekon, the women's quarters. It's not fancy. It's hot in summer, freezing in winter, dark most of the day, and filled with the smell of wool because you were expected to spend most of your waking hours spinning, weaving, and preparing textiles. That's your job. Not art, not poetry, cloth. You spin thread until your fingers cramp. You weave until your back aches. And you do it while managing a household full of children, servants, and the crushing pressure to maintain your honor, which is basically code for don't be noticed, don't be loud, and definitely don't be alone round men, because if you are, rumors start, your reputation shatters, and in this society, once that's gone, you're finished. If you're unmarried, your life is dictated by your father. If you're married, it's your husband. If he dies, then it's your son. Always a man, always watching. You don't marry for love. You marry for alliances, property, status, usually at the teen or 14, often to a man in his late 20s or 30s. You don't get to say no, and once you're married, your purpose is to bear children specifically, male children, a lot of them, because infant mortality is brutal, and if you fail to produce sons, that's your fault. You're defective, cursed, useless, not tragic, just inconvenient pregnancy. Itself is terrifying. There are no doctors for you, no pain relief, no antiseptics, no real understanding of infection. If something goes wrong, you bleed, and then you die, quietly. Maybe someone burns incense afterward, maybe not. Let's say you survive childbirth. Now you're raising kids in a world where half of them want to make it to adulthood. You nurse them, teach them how to speak, how to behave, and then if they're boys they get whisked away at age 7 to begin their public education. You never see them again in the same way. If they're girls, you prepare them to do exactly what you've done. We've married. Repeat. Now, maybe you're thinking, what if I'm in Sparta? Weren't Spartan women free and powerful? Sort of. Spartan women were allowed to own property, exercise, even speak their minds, but that's because their husbands were constantly at war, dying in droves. Spartan women were strong because they had to be, because they were expected to raise tough sons, and manage entire households alone, while the men bled out on some battlefield. They were respected but never fully in charge. And don't forget, they were still married off young, still expected to produce babies as their primary function, and still subject to a society obsessed with military perfection and control. You think maybe you'll escape it all by joining a temple, become a priestess, be close to the gods. Sounds good, until you realize that priestesses are chosen from elite families, usually very young, and often required to remain virgins for life. Some temple duties are downright humiliating, like cleaning sacrificial remains or managing crowds. I've drowned men during public festivals, and if the gods don't answer people's prayers fast enough, guess who gets blamed? You. Even religion doesn't offer safety. There are exceptions. A few women do break through. Sappho of Lesbos, a few oracle priestesses, some queens in the Hellenistic period. But they're outliers, freak accidents of history. You're just a regular woman in a regular household. You spend your life inside, in the shadows, dying quietly during childbirth, forgotten before your bones even cool. Even if you're wealthy, your jewelry can't save you. Your slaves don't make your life glamorous. They just mean you're isolated in a bigger house. Even your funeral is a quiet affair. Women weren't supposed to be remembered with statues or epics. Just a gravestone that might say, she was a good wife. She stayed inside. That's the highest compliment. That's what you're aiming for. Your best day is one where nothing goes wrong. No one talks about you, and your husband doesn't cast you aside for a younger girl. You think again about your modern life, about complaining on social media, walking alone at night, reading what you want, marrying who you choose. In ancient Greece, you get none of that. You are property. You are fragile honor in human form. You are a potential scandal wrapped in linen also. You wanted to try life in ancient Greece. But unless you show up as a rich, adult, male citizen with good connections and flawless Greek, this place is a nightmare. And if you show up as a woman, you wouldn't last a day. So you've had enough of the housework, the battlefield, the weird food, and the body odor. You need a break, a distraction, something entertaining. Something that screams, "This is ancient Greece, and I'm here to experience the culture." You hear people talking excitedly about the upcoming Olympic Games, the grandest event in all of Hellas. Sacred festival in honor of Zeus. You think, finally, a chance to see some action without being in danger. Or maybe even participate. Maybe you'll witness greatness, celebrate human excellence. Maybe you'll grab a souvenir and post about it in some imaginary ancient Instagram caption like, "Chillin' at Olympia, watching naked dudes wrestle. Lol." Except here's the problem. This isn't entertainment the way you imagine it. The ancient Olympic Games were brutal, chaotic, and nothing like your sanitized, Gatorade-sponsored modern spectacles. First of all, they're not held every year, only once every 3 years. Like clockwork, and getting there. It's not just hopping on a chariot and cruising down a scenic road. You're walking for days. Sometimes weeks, along dusty trails, through mountains, sleeping outside with strangers and bugs. Just to get to a city with no hotels and no real sanitation, you show up hoping for a seat. There are no seats. There are stone steps if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's dirt. Thousands of people are crowding in. Sweating, shouting, stinking. It's loud. It's hot. And there's no food court. You want water? Bring your own. You want shade? Too bad. Zeus didn't invent umbrellas. And remember, you can't just show up if you're anyone. The games are only for free Greek males. No women allowed. Not even to watch, if you're a woman. And you get caught in the crowd. That's a death sentence, literally. In Olympia, there was a law. If a married woman was caught sneaking in to watch, she could be thrown off a cliff. The only exception, priestesses of Demeter. Just one gets to watch. Everyone else, stay home, as for the athletes. You're probably imagining Olympic gods with shiny armor, perfect smiles and clean. Sponsored uniforms. No, they're naked, every single one of them, stark. Naked, covered in olive oil. Why? Because this is about showing off the natural human form. Except it's also about spectacle, humiliation, and extremely awkward injuries. You've never seen a sprint until you've seen 20 greased-up men. Charging full speed, flailing in the sun, colliding, bleeding, and occasionally vomiting from heat stroke. Events include running long distances on uneven dirt pots, leaping while holding heavy weights we still don't know why, discus throwing with zero safety precautions, and wrestling where rules are few and biting isn't technically allowed but still happens. Then there's pancration, which is basically MMA without gloves, without weight classes, and without mercy. The only rules: no eye gouging and no biting. Everything else is fair game. And those two rules, constantly broken. Fingers get snapped, jaws dislocated, ribs crushed, people die in the arena. And when that happens, the crowd cheers, because the Olympics weren't just about athleticism. They were about dominance, masculinity, and religious devotion through suffering. There are no medals, no sponsorships, no podiums. You win. You get a crown of olive leaves. That's it. No money, no trophy, just leaves and bragging rights. which actually mean everything because your city-state will now parade you through the streets and treat you like a living god for a while. Then they forget you, and someone else takes your place. If you lose, you get nothing. No recognition, no mercy. You return home humiliated, maybe injured, maybe broke, because, oh yeah, you had to pay your way there and back. There's no Olympic Commission giving you a stipend. You trained for years, starved yourself. Beat your body to the limit, and now you go home with a broken nose and no dinner. The games themselves are also deeply religious. Before the competitions, there are sacrifices, real ones, animals, usually oxen. Dozens of them. Blood runs down the altars. The smoke rises to honor Zeus. You stand in the crowd. The stench of blood and burned flesh mixing with human sweat and dust. While priests chant and politicians yell, and gods help you if it rains, because everything turns to mud, and people start slipping, or worse, they think it's a bad omen and cancel the entire day. No refunds, the athletes. They don't just show up and compete. They have to swear an oath in front of a statue of Zeus, holding thunderbolts, promising they've trained properly and won't cheat. But people still cheat. Bribes, sabotages, faked injuries, it all happens. And when cheaters are caught, they're fined. The money goes to erect statues of Zeus with inscriptions about the cheaters' names, public. Humiliation, forever. Let's say you're not an athlete, but want to make some money. You think about selling something to the crowd. Problem is, vendors are few, and competition is vicious. You're competing with pickpockets, snake oil salesmen, and shady poets offering erotic hymns for a fee. Try to sell something without the right connections. You'll be robbed, fined, or worse. And when the games end, there's no easy exit. Thousands of exhausted, sunburned, possibly bleeding people pack up and walk home, slowly, on aching feet, with no clean clothes and no bath in sight. So you thought the Olympics were an inspiring, glorious tradition, but in ancient Greece, they are also smelly, dangerous, brutally competitive, and borderline unwatchable unless you're into naked violence, so unless you're a trained, oiled-up champion with no shame and a very high pain tolerance, you wouldn't last a day. When you think of ancient Greece, you probably picture smart guys in white robes discussing the meaning of life under olive trees, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the whole philosophical dream team. Maybe you're thinking, okay, forget the war, the disease, and the terrible hygiene. I'll just go to school, get educated, become a thinker. But no, you wouldn't last a day, because education in ancient Greece wasn't some peaceful journey of the mind. It was a brutal, rigid, uncomfortable experience that had nothing to do with you unless you were a freeborn boy from a well. By family, and even then, it was mostly terrible. First off, you don't go to a school building. There is no actual school. Education happens in whatever dusty open space your hired teacher decides is good enough for the day. Could be a courtyard, could be a shaded alley. If you're lucky. Maybe indoors, maybe no desks. No blackboards. Just dirt, papyrus, and pain. You sit on the ground, or maybe on a block of stone. No cushions, no back support. And school starts early. Before the sun gets too hot. You're usually 5 or 6 years old when it begins, and you don't stop until about age 18 unless you're poor, in which case you might get pulled out at 10 to start working. The first subject, memorization, all of it. No helpful visuals, no interactive lessons, no games. Just repetition. You're expected to memorize epic poems, entire books of the Iliad or Odyssey line by line, and recite them out loud. If you make a mistake, your teacher, the grammatists, hits you with a stick. They don't care if you're tired, or hungry, or that your scroll got eaten by a goat. Get it right or get smacked. Writing is next, but not with pens. You use a stylus to scratch into a wax tablet, which feels like trying to do homework on a cold stick of butter. If your hand cramps, too bad. There's no understanding, no therapy, just more writing. If you drop your tablet and ruin your work, you cry quietly, because crying loudly gets you smacked again. And then there's arithmetic. Not math the way you know it. This is math without Arabic numerals, without calculators, without any mercy. You count using pebbles, abacuses, and mental gymnastics. You are expected to multiply large numbers in your head. You are expected to divide without a single helpful diagram. There is no math anxiety, only math. Trauma. Now you move on to music, which sounds nice until you realize that it's not about expressing your soul, it's about playing the lyre exactly the way your kithyrist demands. He's a grumpy old man with a short temper and a long stick. You retort the same 3 songs, over and over again until your fingers bleed or your parents run out of patience. You sing hymns to Apollo, but if your voice cracks, you guessed it, more smacking. Discipline is the foundation of all education. You are not praised for creativity. You are not encouraged to think outside the box. That comes later, maybe, if you survive long enough to study under a philosopher. Most boys don't make it that far. Instead, your education is designed to make you obedient, respectable, and able to quote Homer at parties and when you're not studying. You're in physical training because the Greeks believed a strong body was as important as a strong mind. So after hours of reciting poetry and doing calculations with rocks, you get thrown into a dusty gymnasium where an older man, possibly naked, teaches you how to wrestle. It's awkward, it's confusing, it's probably painful, and it's every single day. Let's say you're rich. You might get a private tutor. Great, right, except now you're under even more pressure. Your parents are paying a fortune for a live-in scholar who watches everything you do and constantly tells you that you raise stupid and lazy. And they're not wrong, because you're 8, exhausted, and probably still recovering from being whipped for writing an epsilon backwards. Now, let's say you do survive this ordeal and become a teenager. You might now study rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking. But this is not casual debate. This is competitive, combative, and terrifying. You're expected to memorize speeches from great orators, perform them in front of crowds, and defend arguments you don't believe in just to prove you can win. Logic is weaponized. Emotion is ignored. Confidence is mandatory. Fail to impress. You're humiliated. Succeed. You become a political tool for someone richer and more connected. Maybe now you're ready for philosophy. Except philosophy doesn't mean sitting in a circle talking about your feelings. It means being grilled with impossible questions by older men who are constantly trying to prove that your brain doesn't work. Socrates didn't teach by giving you answers. He asked you questions until you gave up and admitted you knew nothing. It was like a verbal ambush that never ended. If you wanted to study under someone like Plato or Aristotle, you had to be rich, fluent in Greek, and prepared to be wrong every day for years. And you paid for the privilege. What if you're a girl? Sorry. You don't get an education. Not even the terrible version. You're lucky if your mother teaches you how to read. Most girls are taught household management, weaving and silence. Unless you're from Sparta. Spartan girls are trained physically. sometimes taught poetry, but even then it's only to prepare them to birth strong warrior sons. Education was a tool for making you useful to the state, not wise, not fulfilled, not happy. The goal wasn't to create individuals, it was to create obedient citizens. And most people didn't get it at all. Because remember, most Greeks were farmers, slaves, or laborers. They didn't have time for education. They had time for survival. So unless you were born rich, male, and unusually stubborn, school in ancient Greece was not enlightening. It was exhausting, painful, and occasionally dangerous. You thought it was all scrolls and wisdom. No, it was beatings, blisters, and endless hours of copying stuff you didn't understand. You wouldn't last a day. It's been a long day in ancient Greece. You've survived the education system, the gymnasium, the judgment of philosophers, and you're still standing. Somehow, the sun is finally setting. And you think, maybe now I can relax, grab some food, hit a party, experience some ancient Greek nightlife. No wine, music, dancing, the little poetry under the stars. That's what they're famous for, right? You imagine reclining on a couch while someone plays a flute and pours you wine. You picture laughter, togas, olives, and deep philosophical banter with attractive strangers. In reality, ancient Greek nightlife is messy, exclusive, occasionally terrifying, and usually ends with vomiting or violence. First of all, unless you're a man, and not just any man, but a free male citizen, you're probably not invited. Women don't go out for fun. Married women stay home. Their job is to run the household, not socialize. If you're a woman and you're seen out at night, you're either a slave, a servant, or a hetero, a high-class escort. And even the heteroi, who are educated and skilled in music and conversation, are still viewed as outsiders. Second, there are no clubs, no bars, no safe public gathering spots where everyone mingles. If you want to drink, you go to a symposium, a drinking party. But you don't just walk in. You have to be invited by someone powerful. The symposium isn't just social, it's political, intellectual, and deeply ritualistic. Think of it like an exclusive frat party for ancient intellectuals, except everyone's drunk on one. Watered-down wine and trying to outquote Homer. You enter a private house. You recline on a couch. Shoes off, robes loose. There's a slave to wash your feet, another to pour the wine, and another to play music. All slaves, all silent. The wine, it's not what you're used to. It's mixed with water, usually at a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 parts water, 1 part wine. Because drinking it straight is seen as barbaric. But don't worry, you will still get drunk. The Greeks pace themselves, and the party can go for hours, even days. The host chooses a symposiarch, basically the wine master, the guy in charge of mixing drinks and deciding how drunk everyone should get. He can force you to chug, or cut you off. He can order drinking games or call for a debate. One moment you're relaxing, and the next you're being challenged to a freestyle poetry battle in front of angry drunk men. Now comes the entertainment. You think there'll be a play or a concert. No, it's more chaotic than that. There are flutists, dancers, acrobats, and sometimes people performing strange, suggestive miming routines. Some of it's sexual, some of it's just weird. You laugh. But not too loud, because these are powerful men. Men with political influence. One wrong word and you're tossed out. Or worse, the mood can turn fast. If a debate over politics or poetry gets too heated, wine turns into insults. Insults into fights. There are no bouncers, no police, just men with short tempers and access to knives, and once you're drunk enough, there's another phase, the komos. It's basically the ancient Greek version of a drunken street parade. Everyone spills out of the house and starts wandering through the city, still drinking, still shouting. Often wearing masks or bizarre costumes, they're banging on doors, singing lewd songs. And occasionally flashing people. This isn't festive, it's annoying and terrifying, if you're sober. And trying to sleep, it's a nightmare. If you're caught in the crossfire, you might get slapped, or worse, because nighttime Athens isn't well lit or well policed. There are no street lamps, no patrols, just shadows, stray dogs, and people looking for trouble. And it's not just drunks. There are thieves, thugs, and angry citizens out for revenge. Ancient Greek cities had curfews for slaves. If you're a slave caught out too late without permission, you could be beaten in the street, or accused of plotting a revolt. If you're mistaken for someone else, tough luck. There are no ID cards, just torches and angry men. Even if you're not at a symposium, the options are grim. You want food. Kitchens are closed. Want a snack? Good luck. There are number 24-hour food carts. No taverns. Maybe. You find a vendor selling stale bread or olives. Maybe. The truth is, nightlife isn't really a thing in ancient Greece. It's not a break from the day, it's a dangerous extension of it. The rich get drunk and make political alliances. The poor stay home and hope not to get robbed. And the streets, they belong to whichever group is loudest and most unpredictable. Let's say you are at the party. You drink too much. You pass out. There's no cozy guest room. You're dragged outside. Maybe dumped near a fountain, maybe left in a gutter. No one checks your pulse, no one cares. You wake up covered in dust, missing a sandal, with a pounding headache and a vague memory of insulting someone's uncle who happens to be a city magistrate. So yeah, you thought nightlife in ancient Greece would be cool, chic, sophisticated instead. It's exclusive, erratic, and occasionally life-threatening. Unless you're an elite male with political clout, strong tolerance for wine, and the rhetorical skills of a god, you would on't last a night, let alone a day. So, after surviving education, war, disease, weird food, drunk politicians, and philosophical humiliation, you might start thinking, all right, maybe I could manage this. Maybe I could actually last a day in ancient Greece. But then death taps you on the shoulder. Because in ancient Greece, death was always lurking. It wasn't a rare tragedy, it was part of the daily routine. From the moment you were born, survival was not guaranteed. Let's start there. Childbirth. If you're a woman giving birth in ancient Greece, good luck. There are no doctors. No anesthesia, no sterile tools. You're probably kneeling on a stool in a smoky room, while an older woman shouts instructions and hopes for the best. One wrong move, and it's over. For the baby, or the mother, or both. And even if the birth goes well, the real danger has just begun. Infant mortality was incredibly high. Some historians estimate that up to half of all children died before their 5th birthday. You could be taken by a fever, by infection, by malnutrition, or just because no one knew what a virus was. You get a cough. It could kill you. You eat spoiled bread. It could kill you. You drink from the wrong well. Game over. And if you do survive childhood, congratulations, you get to face adolescence with a diet that's mostly olives and stale barley, surrounded by angry teachers, violent bullies, and the looming threat of conscription. Because if you're a boy, there's a good chance you'll be sent off to fight. You could be drafted at 18, handed a spear, and marched off to kill strangers you've never met. If you're in Sparta, you start training at 7. No family hugs, no bedtime stories. Just daily beatings and military drills. If you mess up, you get flogged. If you cry, you're shamed. If you die, you're buried in a ditch with a short inscription. Died in service, that's it. For women, it's not easier. You avoid war, but not danger. You're married young, maybe 13, maybe 14 to a man twice your age, maybe more. You move into his house, where your job is to bear children, keep quiet, and obey. If your husband dies, you don't get to live free. You get passed to a male relative. Property, always someone's property. And if you ever step out of line, there's no divorce court, no shelter, no hotline, just shame, possibly exile, or worse, and now we come to disease. Plague was a regular visitor. The plague of Athens killed tens of thousands, including Pericles. One of the most powerful men in the city. No one knew how it spread. People blamed the gods, or foreigners, or the wind. But in reality, it was overcrowding, poor sanitation, and a total lack of medical knowledge. You think you can see a doctor? There's no hospital. Physicians are just men with beards who believe your organs are ruled by the for humus, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Feeling sick, you'll be bled, stubbed, or given a potion made from goat dung and sea water. You might get lucky and recover. You might also die screaming with leeches on your face. If you suffer a wound in battle or in the street, there are no antibiotics, no morphine. A serious cut could mean a fever, an infection, a slow death. And all this is assuming you weren't enslaved. Because let's not forget, a massive part of the ancient Greek population were slaves. If you were a slave, you had no legal identity, no rights, no family name. You were property. You could be beaten, sold, stopped, or killed, and no one would bat an eye. Slaves built temples, rowed warships, taught children, harvested crops, and died quietly. So, you're rich, fine. You think money will save you. And sure, it helps. You eat better. You sleep indoors. You might live to 50. But wealth also paints a target on your back. You could be exiled in a political purge. You could be assassinated. You could be forced to drink poison after a shady trial where someone claims you corrupted the youth. Hello, Socrates. Even the elite weren't safe. The gods, the politicians, the mob all could turn on you. Oh, and let's talk natural disasters. Earthquakes, common. Fires, frequent. If your house catches fire, it burns to the ground. There's no fire department, no insurance, just ashes. One bad storm at sea, and an entire fleet disappears. You pray to Poseidon, sacrifice a goat. But you know the truth. Once you're out there, you're at his mercy. And maybe worst of all, the afterlife wasn't even comforting. Ancient Greeks didn't believe in heaven. Their version of the afterlife was a shadowy underworld called Hades. Most souls went there grey, cold and empty. You wander as a shade, forgotten, no reward, just gloom. Unless you were a hero who died in battle, then maybe, you made it to the Elysian fields. But most didn't. Most just faded. So yeah, you wanted to live in ancient Greece. You imagined philosophy, democracy, sunshine, and glory. What you got was disease, war, inequality, and death. Fast, slow, or humiliating death was always ready. There was no modern medicine, No human rights. No safety net. You didn't just have a bad day. You had a day. And you were lucky to get through it alive. You would outlast one. So, the next time you watch a movie set in ancient Greece, when you see the marble statues, the poetic speeches, the togas fluttering in the Mediterranean breeze, remember, that version of Greece was a filtered. Highlight reel. Real ancient Greece was brutal, confusing, and forgiving, unless you were an elite. Free, land-owning man, with political connections, good health, and a strong liver. You were one bad day away from disaster. Philosophy didn't save you from famine. Democracy didn't protect you from war. The gods. They were just as likely to ruin your life as bless it. You would outlast a day, not because you're weak, but because ancient Greece was built on struggle. And most of its people barely survived it. But hey, at least they gave us math and tragedy. Lots and lots of tragedy.